Selam Hello, everyone. This is Lilly. As you know, we're taking a little break. And on that break, I hope that you guys are all taking a break as well and having some good, healthful, happy sex. That is what our friend Julie Githiru-Goko would recommend for you in this episode. The way that intimacy, is so important in all of our lives. And so Julie came on a couple months ago. And again, one of those episodes where we heard from readers. She answers your questions. There are several in this episode, questions that came from you. So dig in, get comfortable, put the headphones on if you need to, if the kids are nearby, and enjoy this episode of Let's Get It On with my friend, psychosexual therapist, Julie Githiru-Goko.
But sex is the easy part, Lily.
Yes.
The actual
Thank
act
you.
of
Say
sex
that.
is the easy part.
Absolutely.
The conversation around it is the hardest part that people don't have. And so after sex, they're left thinking, I feel dissatisfied. I would have wanted this. Maybe next time I'll ask.
Right.
But the time never happens.
Salam and hello. My name is Lilly Bekele-Piper and happy Valentine's Day and welcome to the show. I'm so glad you've tuned in today. I don't know about you, but for me, Valentine's Day is mostly just a day. My husband and I, over the last many years, have just decided, you know what? We're just going to try and keep love alive, so we don't need to necessarily celebrate the holiday. But as I look around Nairobi, it is certainly a day that people are into. The holiday seems to have taken off, and people are out there spending money, making plans of how to spread a little romance and love this day. So if that's you, I hope you're having a beautiful day today. So in honor of this kind of made-up holiday, I have to admit, we thought we would do an episode all about love, intimacy, pleasure, and sex. That's right, sex. That's what our topic is about today. So if that is a topic that is sensitive to you or maybe a little bit tender, it might be an episode that you want to skip. But we are going to talk about it from a way that I hope makes you feel empowered and makes you feel strong and connected, not just to your partner, but also to yourself. Here on the continent, we haven't always done the best job of talking about sex. Some of us may have grown up in homes where it wasn't mentioned at all. And certainly most of our education systems in the continent don't have sexual education. So a lot of us are learning about sex from media or from friends. Some cultures, like in Uganda, have a tradition of sengas where there are people in your community, aunties or other, trusted loved ones who do talk about sex and try and prepare young people before they get married. But sex isn't just at marriage anymore. We know that. We know that people are having sex all the time, before they wed, at young ages, at old ages. And the purpose of this show today is just for us to have a real conversation with information that helps us feel more connected, empowered, strong, and connected, both to ourselves and to our partners, to help us feel positively about sex. And that's really what I want for all of us. For us as Black people, as Africans, as members of the diaspora, it's really time for us to feel more positively and more confident in our sexual health and well-being. So to help us get to that point, I have my good friend, and truly she is my friend. I know every episode you think I call every guest my friend, but truly today, my very good friend, Julie Githiru-Goko is with us. Julie is a psychodynamic, psychosexual psychotherapist who has over 2 decades of experience treating people both in the United Kingdom and here in Kenya. She has a master's in psychosexual therapy and has experience working with trauma-focused therapy, depression, addiction, anxiety, and sexual dysfunction. Julie is also written as a sexual health columnist for Couture Africa magazine and is a member of both the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association, as well as the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy. Julie has been in private practice for many years and just brings to the show just a wealth of information. And so I could not be more pleased to have Julie back on the show today. Thank you, Julie, for being with us.
Thank you, Lily.
So glad to have you here. So I will just out myself at the beginning to say that this is not an easy topic for me to talk about. I'm feeling a little nervous, but I'm just going to, go with the flow and be a vessel for some of the questions that we have for you today.
Okay,
You're going to help me.
Yeah,
You're going to dig deep in the friend bucket and the therapist bucket.
But it's interesting that sex is so difficult to talk about, yet we all came about through a sexual encounter.
Yes, thank you for framing it that way. Indeed, we would not be here had it not been for this good thing
That's
called
it.
sex. So we're going to
Yeah.
get into it today. So, in fact, I want to appreciate the women in my life and my producers, Rahma and Becky's lives, who
Mhm.
we asked, could you give us some questions? What is on your mind about sex? What do you want to know? And so, thank you to all those women who actually sent us some questions. So, Julie, the questions that I'm sharing with you came from women that we love and know and who had questions for you. So, we're going to try and get through as many of them as we can. There were so many, which really does show us that I think trusted information around
Yeah.
sex that doesn't just come from social media or from, a TV show is really lacking, and that we need more of this kind of conversation. So let's just get into it. All right. So the first question we had, which is something I think a lot of us can relate to, especially on a Valentine's Day, is, this question says, we've been in a relationship for a long time and the romance has fizzled out. How do we bring it back and keep it alive? And I do want to acknowledge that this question comes from somebody who says romance has fizzled out. Not necessarily sex, but romance. And I think sometimes we conflate the two.
Yes.
They become one and the same. So answer the question as however you would interpret that.
And also you're saying we.
Yeah.
So it's implying that both of them are experiencing it as the same. It has fizzled out for both. So it's difficult because when we think about relationships that have lasted for a long time, we can't have the same momentum and drive as we did from the start. You're busy, you've got work, maybe you've gotten a family, and you've gotten into this sort of mundane tasks and getting on in daily life. So it's difficult to get the momentum unless you then are really intentional about it. And that means prioritizing the relationship. That this is almost like the relationship can be a business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not just a business, but like on the to-do list.
Yeah. What can we do to make the relationship more fun and exciting? What things did we do that we're no longer doing? How can we bring in that date night, not just because it's Valentine's Day, but because you want to, because you're interested in your partner. Sometimes different seasons come in life and you can't be bothered to put it in the work with your partner. That just happens.
Sure.
But, it's being able to say that I'm going to be intentional, I'm going to be deliberate, I'm going to be loving, I'm going to be caring, and I'm going to put the spark in it, not because my partner wants to, but I want to receive something that's of benefit. Yeah. So you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for yourself. And by extension, then they benefit and then give back generously as well.
So this idea of doing it for them, actually it's reciprocal. It's planting the seed, watering it, but you're reaping the benefit at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then they do the same.
Let's hope so, right?
Yeah.
Let's hope that reciprocates. Okay, so on a similar vein, the next question is, I never initiate sex. I simply don't feel comfortable to, and I often do not have the desire to, although I know my husband would like me to do so sometimes. And this person ends with help. So help, Julie, this initiating of sex, getting started in the first place.
But the one that doesn't initiate tends to hold the control within the sexual relationship because that their partner then never gets to feel desired.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, they always are pursued. They can reject. They can decide, actually, I don't want sex right now. I want it in this kind of way. So that they're in control. So one of my questions to that individual would be, what are some of the discomforts around initiating? Is it letting go of the control? Is the communication poor? Because if we look at communication as a way of foreplay, then by the time you're actually getting to sex, penetrative sex or any kind of sex, you're already excited and drawn into the relationship. But if the communication isn't there, you're not going to want to initiate because maybe you're angry. And usually anger is one of the most divisive parts of that can play out within a sexual relationship. So the initiating or lack of may be to do with some of the underlying issue around communication.
Which kind of goes to your first question around the intention and making your time for your partner, investing in the relationship. All these things dovetail into each other. But let's talk about the communication piece, because I think it would be easy to hear you say that and just hear flirting or sexting or being, like initiating that, the communication being linked to initiating sex. Is there more to the communication in a relationship other than just let's get it on?
Yeah, it's being able to be intimate, it's able to be vulnerable, to talk about the emotional piece, how you're feeling in your day to day, maybe about children, but more from a place of not tasks, but your worries, your concerns, your fears, your joys, those type of conversations. Not just, have you paid the bills? Do you have M-Pesa? Have we got shopping? Is there milk in the house? Those things you can have with anybody, but something of real value.
Yeah.
And then if you're connecting with a partner in a way that it feels intentional and more vulnerable and emotional, then it's kind of a segue into then having sex with somebody because you're feeling connected. That's what
It's
you're trying to. It's connection.
Yeah, right. The actual physical act of sex is an extension of the connection that you should have emotionally, right?
Absolutely.
And it's interesting, we definitely get into seasons. My husband and I joke about this, where we're like in roommate season,
yes,
where there's just so much to do. We're like, there's a busy season where we're expecting guests, or we're about to, kids' school is starting again, and you're just like task oriented, and we have to catch ourselves and be like, wait, you're not my roommate.
Yes.
You are my partner.
Yes.
You're my lover. You're all these things. But it's so easy, especially in the world that we live in now, where it's just so hectic.
Yeah.
It feels hectic all the time. Yeah. Do you have any good ways to help us slow down and create that connection?
That's it. It's slowing down, realizing that you're not roommates, that this person has and shares a unique relationship with you that you've decided not to have with any other person, if that's a monogamous relationship, that you've decided it's this person only, and what differentiates this relationship from any other. And it'll be the level of emotion and connection and the sexual intimacy. So being able to remind them and being able to communicate, actually, we haven't had sex in a while and I need this.
Yeah.
Being confident to say, my body needs, I desire you, I would like to be intimate.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, wow. Even saying that makes me blush. Glad I'm Black. When you're saying all that too, it makes me think about how much we talk with our girlfriends. I'll just talk about women because I don't know if men do this per se, but we talk with our girlfriends and we can get very, very intimate and we share these like really close connections. And I think we often crave that connection. But you said something that really resonates with me, is that with your partner, your sexual partner, there is a connection that you've decided you're only going to share with that person if you're in a monogamous relationship, which is, I will say for the listeners, is probably how we're framing most of the conversation today, is in the context of monogamy. So, and that is really what makes it unique, is that there is a singular person you've decided to have a different relationship. But I think we sometimes miss that, honestly, because we do, especially as women, connect with one another so much that the intimacy we have with our girlfriends can kind of, we don't invest the same with our partner.
Yes, because we're women, we share things that that your girlfriend is going to understand, maybe in a similar way to yourself. So then to share with your partner, you have to explain a lot. They're not going to understand the context.
So true.
But it's important because the more they understand about you, the more they connect with you. And the more they connect with you and you feel a connection with them, you're going to want to have a different kind of sexual relationship with them.
Definitely. All right. So
it's all pieces in a puzzle.
It is. And, it makes me realize, too, just how much this one conversation is we're not going to get to everything, because it's layer upon layer, it's pieces in a puzzle. It's a web that you're weaving kind of constantly, especially if you're in a long-term relationship.
Yes.
There are a couple of questions coming up that are more about, I think, the shorter-term relationships, so that some of your answers may change.
Yes.
When you're not thinking about forever with that partner. But when you are thinking about forever, it's a lot to think about. Yeah, because every seed you plant, kind of, it's going to pop up eventually, right?
Yes.
You're going to have to deal with that eventually. So, okay, a little bit of a fun question here, since it's Valentine's Day, Julie. This listener / friend of ours, I should say, said, I could never buy a sex toy, but I do want to have more fun with sex. Are there basic tips for making sex more interesting or fun?
Sex toys are interesting in that the go-to would be that you're going to then work towards having an orgasm. But that's why somebody wants a sex toy.
Isn't that what all sex should be working towards?
Not necessarily.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, this is a change of...
because if you're using a sex toy, then you're using something battery operated.
Sure.
Which no mouth, finger, or vagina is ever going to replicate. So you're setting yourself up to then getting a heightened level of arousal and climax that no real human will ever help you achieve. So it's something that's called an idiosyncratic masturbatory style. So there's actually a term for it. That your body will never get that level of stimulation from another person. You can't. I mean,
sure. That makes sense. I mean, like using a high-speed blender as opposed to a whisk.
Exactly.
Not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Okay, but let me ask you, this is interesting. I wouldn't consider myself an expert in this area, but this is new information for me. So let me ask you so is it discouraged then, the use of that, so that people don't then have dissatisfaction when they're with a real human?
Well, when I work with clients with sexual dysfunction and looking at orgasm, I wouldn't advise it. If it's for a female and she wants to find pleasure, start with your hand.
Okay.
That one it's not going to move at whatever.
You're going to get a cramp, so you can only go so far.
Exactly.
Yes. I'm just saying, I've heard, yes.
So it's not going to work the same way. So you want to try and limit the level of stimulation so that you can replicate it with your partner, so that you can give them guidance from what it is that you've learned from using your own equipment, your own hand. Rather than using
really good
something.
Advice, especially for young people. I think sex toys and all that is out there so much. Like, I feel like when we were younger, you had to really look for it. Now you can definitely order on Jumia, I've heard. So I think that's good for people to know that this is not going to be the same as a human partner. And you need to know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't always recommend that that's the best case for people. That's not going to, let's say, serve you long term or your relationship.
Well, you could use it maybe as a one-off with your partner, but then you're getting into another realm of conversation that you feel safe enough to say, let's do this. Let's share this level of stimulation with each other, and you introduce them. But some couples don't get there. So it's being able to maybe use your hands if you're going to do that on your own, and not then find that when you're having sex with them, things are very different.
I think that's really important, because I think that's the same for not only the toys, but it's like images on Instagram or any social media, right? Like a woman looks like that on the media, but doesn't look like that in real life, right? It's the whole porn complex. And what we've done to women and the image of women in real life as opposed to an image elsewhere.
Rippleless.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. It's not real. So all of this is actually interfering probably with the reality of sex that we all live with day to day, which is really, kind of a tragic outcome of our modern society.
Yes.
For sure. Okay. So the listener / writer of this question said, what are the basic tips to make sex more interesting or fun then? So you're saying start with your hand, start with kind of basic what you have available attached to your body. What else? What are some other tips for making fun? Today's Valentine's Day. Potentially people are going to try and have some fun today. So what are some
using your imagination?
Okay.
What kind of role plays would you like? What kind of fantasies have you thought of? What things do you feel comfortable to share and enact together? What things maybe had you done before in the earlier stages of dating that you've kind of feel a bit embarrassed to bring up now? But, at one point, the two of you were doing that.
Yeah.
So it's not too far away, being able to rekindle that and those memories and try and reintroduce them into this stage of the relationship.
Why do people like role play? Doesn't that feed into that same idea of like the fakeness of a toy or?
But it's fun.
Okay, just a simple, pure fun.
It's just fun, and you're getting to a level of vulnerability with your partner that you can be playful.
Okay, the vulnerability. See that underneath the fun. Is what creates a connection.
But it's just like kids. See, kids play dress up. They're in this role play. They're being doctors, they're nurses, they're teachers, but they're just going into their imagination and playing out something that they would like to experience.
Sure.
And now as adults, you're just finding a different way to play, which is just through sex.
Okay. So I like how you say that too, because I think if we can play, then maybe some of that pressure, that performance anxiety, maybe that lifts a bit from people, and the need to look or sound like whatever you've seen goes away, and you can kind of maybe hopefully stay in the moment and have fun. Okay, that's good. I like that. You're good. You're good, Julie. Okay.
I'm trying.
There's so many more questions, so we're trying to get through as many as we can. This is a question I think many people could relate to. As a woman, sometimes I can compromise on my own pleasure. How do I make sure our pleasures are equally centered?
I suppose, are they ever going to be equally centered? I suppose that's the dilemma in that. Because there are so many things at play there when you think about equality and sexuality. Is culture will come into it, religion will come into it, your education around sex, whether there's a feeling of not wanting to be too sexually dominant and then perceived as being promiscuous. It taps into so much about the individual as to how they're going to show up within a sexual experience with a partner.
Yeah.
So it may be I will not talk about my sexual needs and let them feel pleasure. I'm here to serve rather than be attended to.
So it sounds
doesn't
like
make
there's
it
not
right.
a good or easy answer to this.
No.
But I guess it goes to that connection and having trust in the partnership.
Feeling
and
safe within the
feeling
relationship
safe,
that you can ask for sex to continue even if your partner has climaxed. Because, the assumption is when he comes, sex ends.
Right.
Whereas what you're saying is, I want to think about my own sexual needs, and this will continue for however long it continues for. And this person loves me enough and is connected enough to me to want me to get to a place of climax, if that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like you should have that conversation maybe before you're in the act or post-act, because it seems like after a moment you might not be as successful getting a response that you want.
Yeah, because too late by that point. They're thinking, okay, we're done.
I was talking to Rahma, my producer, beforehand, saying if this was a conversation around nutrition, I wouldn't be feeling nervous or any kind of way. I'd just like, oh, let's talk about nutrition. But how it's about sex and you feel a little bit nervous, And so similarly with our own partner who we're going to have sex with, we will struggle to have these conversations beforehand. We get into the act, something doesn't go maybe the way we want to, and we struggle to have a conversation about it.
Yes. So after sex, they're left thinking, I feel dissatisfied. I would have wanted this. Maybe next time I'll ask.
Right.
But the time never happens.
So I started off this conversation talking a little bit about our context here in the continent around our vocabulary or lack thereof, or education, exposure to sex in healthy, positive ways. I'm not talking about simply knowing it exists or, the dysfunction we see. How can we kind of do better around this? Because you're right. I mean, the conversation around it is too difficult. And I think in our cultures in particular, it's too difficult. And we don't have proper sex education. And if it's and forget sex education, I just can reflect on my own experience of pre-puberty and not having a proper conversation with my mom, even about menstruation. And then you start menstruating and completely freak out. And that's not even sex, So, and that's still the case for so many of our young people. So if we can sidetrack the pleasure sex conversation, just talking about the communication around sex piece, what are you seeing in your work that you can advise us on? What can we do better to start having healthier, more frequent, and normal conversations around sex so that, our kids have better situations than we have had?
Well, we would then have to be in a more of a comfortable place to talk about sex before you can then talk to your child about sex.
Right.
And even talking to them about their bodies. Because when we think about puberty and girls starting their period, we're thinking about, oh my God, they're going to fall pregnant. The language around it. It seems like it's something disastrous.
Right.
And now you're going to get pregnant. It happens to you. You're not part
you're
of
fall pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. The language is all, it's negative.
Right.
But if we're then comfortable in ourselves to talk about sex and relationships, then we're communicating something different to our children. We're helping them understand how to communicate consent using the words no, thinking about proximity, how close we let people, close enough to our body, especially as young children, being able to communicate what they like and don't like around touch. Then the older they get and you've introduced this kind of communication, you would hope it would extrapolate into relationships with other adults.
That's great, Julie. I think that the three things you said there are so, so important. Consent, touch, there's one more. Proximity. I think all those three things in our culture, in our African cultures, it's all like, go give auntie a hug, a kiss, which is, we understand the intention behind that. But I think we need to also empower our kids also to know positive touch, negative touch, some of our schools are teaching that. Many of them are not. This idea of proximity. My daughter and I she started a menstrual health program, and in the early stages of going into some communities, talking to girls about their menstrual health, and eventually how they translated it was the transactional sex is what it quickly went to. And bodily autonomy came up, and it was like, oh, I don't have to say yes in order to get pads. I don't have to have sex with the boda driver. I don't have to. I'm like, yes, you do have autonomy. But just never having been told that you do is crippling.
Yeah.
And I think the culture may not change quick enough, but we have got to start putting those messages out there. Proximity, touch, and consent are huge.
They're huge.
And everyone needs to have that language.
Yeah, especially as you said, in the culture, and even in our day-to-day, you find children, maybe because of responsibilities that parents are in or have, they're left with maybe a carer at home, just being able to say no around washing private areas, washing genitals, being seated on a border with a stranger, you're so close. Just areas where sometimes children are put into, which then teach them something else around how close strangers are allowed to get close to their body. Being able to teach them something else around consent and saying no.
So, I think for those listening, if you are in any position in a relationship with a child that's a trusting relationship where you have that space to have those conversations, please do. It's so important and could really save and protect their lives and protect their safety. So thank you. That's such important information. Okay. A couple of really good questions coming up here that I think are really specific, but I think really important. So someone asked us, how do I get back into the groove after a divorce? I love this question.
Yeah, it's a very lovely question because somebody wants to get back. They're not seeing that life has ended or love or sex has ended after a divorce, after a marriage has ended. But equally, this group of people tend to be most at risk because they've had a relationship for a period of time where they've maybe felt protected. They haven't had to use protection for sex.
True. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
They haven't had to negotiate maybe sex as well. We don't know. And now they're in a situation where they're exposed to risk. It's rough out on the streets nowadays,
And when you say risk, do you mean emotional risk? Do you mean health risk?
Health risk.
Okay.
Emotional risk, especially sexually, STIs. They're now in a place where maybe they're thinking, I'm close to menopause, the risk of getting pregnant is low, but there's so many other risks out there. And being able to navigate and negotiate safe sex is hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've told us what the risks are, but how do they get back in their groove then? What do they do?
Oh, they have to try, they have to try, but with caution.
Okay.
Taking it slowly. Are they ready for a relationship? Even the starting point is, what are they looking for? Are they looking for just a sexual partner?
Right.
Or are they looking for a relationship? And if it is either one of those, how can they keep themselves safe in meeting people, putting themselves out there, whether it's online dating, whether it's being introduced to a friend of a friend, but just taking their time.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, taking their time.
Yeah. There's no rush.
Yeah. It's maybe I think also when you have been in a relationship and you're no longer in, you're missing so much more than just the sexual intimacy, I'm sure, right? The emotional intimacy, the partnership, the companionship.
Yes.
And like you said, identifying what it is that you're seeking, what it is, and can it be met through other ways? Is there something other than a partner or a sexual partner that can meet those needs
But I suppose there's something very valuable about having a sexual relationship that maybe somebody misses, that they want to get that met through another partner.
And I imagine, too, there must be trust that has to be rebuilt. I mean, within your practice, is there a window of time that you advise clients to say, like, if you've been through, because another question we had, and maybe I should just go to that one, was kind of around how do you reestablish intimacy after a betrayal?
Yeah.
So, a marriage may have ended in a divorce unrelated to betrayal, but either way, a commitment has ended.
Yes.
So is there a period of time where you think someone is particularly emotionally vulnerable and you should probably avoid? Because I know I've read you shouldn't make any life decisions like within 6 months or something like that of a divorce or something. So what's your general advice for making those kind of bigger commitments after divorce? Is there a window?
If we think of grief and the loss of a loved one, the period of time can be anything from 18 months to 2 years.
Okay. Before what?
Before you want to re-engage maybe or you're having brighter days, and you're feeling in a maybe brighter, more happier place.
Yeah.
So if you look at it, maybe use that as a guide for a relationship ending, and then thinking about starting something new. Sort of 18 months to 2 years.
Wow. So as deep as grief, as losing a loved one, because you're mourning the loss of a life you've created with someone.
Something that you imagined wouldn't end maybe in the way that it has, especially if it's been from a betrayal.
Right, of course. So 18 months to 2 years. I think that's good advice for also those of us who love people who have gone through a divorce or through a betrayal, to know it is the same as it is a real grief. It needs time and it needs support, and to support our friends in those spaces. So in terms of establishing trust after intimacy and intimacy after betrayal, I'm sure that is something that must come up quite a lot in your practice. How do you begin to rebuild those bridges and establish intimacy after betrayal? Because that's different than sex.
It's surprisingly, usually after a betrayal, the couple need to connect. They crave connection from each other. So you may find they go through a period of a lot of sex.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. In order to get that intimacy.
In order to get the intimacy and not have to talk about what actually happened. It's almost sort of glossing over the betrayal and hurt by saying, actually, I'm having sex again. This is great. We don't have to get to it. But it doesn't last.
Right.
Because it's false, and the cracks soon appear when they realize, actually, I'm really hurt and I'm really angry. And then building the trust again can take age. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes people don't get to a place where they're able to forgive and move on together, but they find a happier way to part and go their separate ways.
Yeah, you said earlier that the sex was the easy part.
Yeah, sex is the easy part. The conversation
around it,
is hard.
The intimacy around it,
Absolutely.
all of that is the hard part.
It's hard.
Wow, TV has lied to us. The movies have lied to us.
They have.
Yeah, the sex is the easy part. It's everything else that really takes everything else, the head, the heart, to cooperate,
Yes.
Yeah. This was a really interesting question. I thought that was a really good one. Is it normal for a sex drive to change with the seasons? For example, could it be lower in the winter? Or like right now, it's so hot.
It's so hot
in Nairobi.
Yeah.
Are people going to have a different time between the sheets?
Well, I suppose if you think of going on holiday, people tend to have more sex when they're on holiday. And typically we go on holiday where there's sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, seasons play a part. And having sex in the winter, it's really cold and grey and miserable. You're not maybe so inclined to do that because the environment needs to be more conducive.
I would think people want to be warm.
Yeah, summer works because it is warm. But then you don't want too hot either.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I would think winter would be better because you warm me up.
No. Because it's grey, it's miserable, maybe it's raining. It's just not the kind of environment you imagined for sex. But if it's sunny, it changes your mood anyway.
Yeah.
So seasons definitely play a part, but also seasons in life.
I feel like this is also a question that only a woman would ask. I feel like no man anywhere has ever looked outside and been like, oh, it's gray. I don't feel like sex today. I don't feel like any man anywhere has ever felt that. If I'm wrong, please let me know. But I definitely don't feel like that's ever true. But that's good to know. I guess to give ourselves grace when we're like, I'm in a funk and it's been raining when rainy season hits. Like, give yourself grace. It's rainy season.
It will pass. Seasons pass.
Okay. So something that doesn't always pass, and I really, really appreciate the vulnerability of this question, is mental health. We live with our mental health day in and day out. Some of us are blessed to find good therapists who can help us or medication that works, but not everyone.
Yeah.
So this question is, how do I navigate sex drive on antidepressants? What they don't say, but I think what I have read in the past is that antidepressants can suppress your sex drive. Some can. And, I know in your practice, you have treated people for just mental health and some with sexual dysfunction and the both combinations. So how do you advise people, to try and keep sex, who want to keep having sex, even if the medication they're taking is dampening their sex drive?
Usually, depending on the antidepressant, it's usually in the transition stage that the libido tends to drop because the body's adjusting.
What do you mean transition stage?
As in you're getting used to it. It's sort of
the first couple
of months, maybe your body is adjusting to the medication. And in that phase, your libido may be low.
Okay.
But if it goes for an extended period of time, then there's a number of options to think about. It's looking at the dosage, it's looking at the type of medication. And antidepressants don't work in isolation. So
What do you mean by that?
As in, what else is somebody doing in order to help their mood?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are they exercising? Are they eating well? Are they resting well? All these things make up good and healthy mental health. Because if we look at the brain and the gut, I mean, those two work together. We're looking at dopamine levels, we're looking at serotonin. So those need to be, it's a partnership. So if somebody is on antidepressants, how are they also helping themselves? Are they in therapy as well to then counteract how their mood might also be low and to get motivation and be able to work through some of the challenges which have maybe impacted their mental health negatively?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That we're nothing works in isolation,
No,
right?
it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah. So it has to be, and I realize, I think the older I get, especially, just that having a good therapist is such a privilege if you can navigate and find a good one, and it's from a cost perspective, a time perspective, even a culture perspective. You know, it's
a commitment.
It's a commitment.
It's a relationship.
It's a relationship you have to build, and so if someone can't find a therapist, is it safe to be on antidepressants only? Or you really do recommend it needs to be in the care of somebody who can monitor your
absolutely.
mental health?
I mean, if somebody's on an antidepressant, you would at least hope they've got a psychiatrist. Somebody is prescribing that.
Right.
And they're talking to somebody who is reviewing and keeping them in check with regards to medication.
Yeah.
But even still, they still need somebody to talk through some of the challenges that they are having.
Yeah. Really important. Really important.
And exercise.
Exercise. Yeah.
We take it for granted.
Just a simple walk.
A simple walk.
Yeah. There's so many good apps out there. One of my favorites is like the New York Times 7-minute workout. Do you know this one?
No.
You can do it in your house. It's 7 minutes and you don't need any special equipment. And it's just a great workout and it works all parts of the body. I think you need a chair. That's what you need. You need a chair.
Excellent.
Yeah. And if you're very fit, you can increase it from 7 minutes to 14 to 21. I mean, it just goes in increments, 7 movements, 1 minute each, and then you can just increase the time. I'm not super diligent about doing that one particularly, but I found that like in the very least, I have 7 minutes.
Yes.
Like if I'm ever traveling or, you've gone up country to visit family and like, I can't work out here. I don't have my treadmill. I can't walk. You can do 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And exercises. Yeah.
It's key. I mean, this year I've started walking around, going to Jeffries.
Yeah. Oh, good
just getting out, especially in this weather. It's
beautiful. For sure. Yeah. I don't like exercise, but I like the high at the end. So I'm chasing that. Yeah. I'm chasing that dopamine for sure. All right. Again, another wonderful question. Again, just thank you for all these amazing women who sent these questions in. I really do appreciate them. So this question, it's my first time dating a person of the same gender. How do I approach intimacy?
I suppose, would it be different? Or are they coming from a place that's very heteronormative? They've maybe grown up in a home where there haven't been same-sex parents, so there's an assumption of how their gendered parents will behave within a relationship with somebody, and maybe they're conforming to that. But being able to have conversations with their partner around, the same way we looked at earlier, being able to communicate what it is that they want within that relationship. Is it an intimate relationship? Or is it just going to be an emotional relationship? Is it going to be both? And being able to communicate their needs, their fears, their anxieties, especially if it's a first-time same-sex relationship. They're experiencing something new and they're in a sexual minority. So there's already many challenges from the beginning, which they need to talk about and navigate through.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
What about the people around them? How can they support them? I think, if we talk about we're not comfortable with sex in African contexts, we're definitely not comfortable with queer sex.
Yeah.
And I think it's at all levels, right? Like I'm pretty sure in a lot of spaces it's still criminalized. It's still criminalized to have it on TV or in movies. So there's not even places you can look and say, oh, I can see a healthy relationship here and look to that as a model. Like it's just not there. So how can we build support networks around those who we love who are in same-sex relationships?
It's seeing what is already out there. And it may not be amongst friends. It may be sort of through books, through podcasts, through shows that they've seen which are informed and being able to share their anxieties. It's talking.
Yeah.
That even if they have friendship groups which aren't same sex in a sexual relationship, being able to just communicate with them so that people around them aren't fearful.
Absolutely.
But also being able to keep themselves safe, because safety is key. You're not going to feel expressive about your sexuality if you feel that you're going to be at risk of harm.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's the part that breaks your heart, because if you don't feel safe, you can't feel free.
You can't feel free.
You can't feel free. And that's a human right.
Yeah.
It's a human right, plain and simple. I will say there's a great podcast, AfroQueer, that really does tell stories about people from the continent in the queer community that I would highly recommend and say, if you're looking for a resource, that's definitely one in the podcast space I can point to, and we'll look for other ones that I can put in the show notes. I think we can all do better about supporting the queer community. And you can look for some more content from Selam Hello in the coming months. We're going to be focusing on that a bit more. So thank you. I think that's an important topic and something that as Africans, we can do better in that space. Okay, so a question about young people and sex. I always hesitate around book recommendations, asking people for that, because it kind of puts you on the spot as being the library and like the full stop. But no pressure here, Julie. This is just more of a general question. But any book recommendations on navigating relationships and sex for young people? And to add to that, give us a starting point for talking to our kids about sex in a way that's positive and leaves the door open for future conversations. So maybe a mishmash of those, maybe just resources that parents can turn to help them have positive conversations around sex. Places you can point them to, online, books, anywhere, just to get the conversation going if they themselves don't feel like they know where to start.
I think a starting point, as I was sort of getting into earlier, is finding out how comfortable they feel. Because when they feel comfortable about talking about sex, their own sex, then they can communicate better to children. And for adults, for children, I don't have a list which I could think of the top of my head, but somebody like Esther Perel, you can't go wrong.
Sure.
You can't go wrong with. She has so much information out there on sex and relationships. And a start is a good source of information.
She has a huge digital footprint, so easy to find. Yeah. Okay.
So that would be a starting point. And being able to bring in language that children feel comfortable with, and even role play with them. How would you say no?
Yeah.
Being able to give them the accurate names for body parts.
We did that with our kids. And then we thought we were doing the right thing, giving them anatomical names. I still think we did, but then we would be in public and they'd be like, "Mommy, my penis hurts." And we'd be like, that's fine. But in Africa, then the voices are really carrying, really loud. But yes, you got to start.
But it's important.
With that, the
it's
biology.
Important. The biology, they've got to know that this is called this because. And then they're comfortable with the language.
And there's no shame.
And there's no shame. That's exactly it. Because we're teaching them shame. I'm going to call it a flower.
Yeah.
But actually it isn't.
Right.
It's my vulva area. And, I'm going to call it that and feel comfortable to say it and to know it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a beautiful thing that Zana Africa did recently. They did a period party a couple months ago for young women in Kenya who were having their period for the first time. And they got free pads and they answered questions. It was set up at I don't remember, maybe a health fair or something like that. But I just thought this is something that I've seen in the West. And I was like, this is just a breath of fresh air to see it in the continent. So just to extend on your recommendation around using anatomical body parts, celebrating every phase of our children's development, right? You've got your period. This means that you're in a brand new season of life, right? And we celebrate that. And by celebrating it, we just completely move out the space for shame.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And hopefully by that we create the safety they need to then keep having the conversation about the next phase.
Yes.
And when those feelings start to come in for, somebody, they feel safe and we can introduce the next topic.
Yes, it's interesting when you find family, especially if there's boys within the same family. Girls are almost, you've got to keep this thing a secret, you've got to keep it hidden. Right. But actually, it's a part of life.
Exactly.
It's a part of life.
Absolutely.
So it's to remove the shame and stigma around it and being able to talk about it.
Absolutely. And celebrate it too, right?
Absolutely.
Our bodies are a wonder. Our bodies are a wonder.
Absolutely.
So a couple more questions, Julie. I wanted to spend a little time on this, and I intentionally kind of kept it towards the end of the podcast. So if you've been listening so far in the conversation has been really kind of easy breezy for you, and it's been informative. I'm so glad. I want to ask Julie a question about sexual trauma and recovery from that. So if this is a sensitive area for you, this might be a good time to change the channel. You have, as a therapist in your work, you have worked with clients around sexual trauma. There's certainly no 3-step program or easy answers that we can put out there. But unfortunately, we do know that the data shows that, I think at least in the US and Northern America, it's like 1 in 4 women will experience sexual trauma before the age of 30. I think on the continent, the numbers are quite staggering as well. So it is a part of the fabric of the sex conversations we're having is sexual trauma. Instances of early marriage are still a part of many cultures. Female genital mutilation is still a part of the fabric that we live in. So, Julie, in helping families and women navigate sexual trauma, what do we need to know if someone we know or ourselves have experienced it? What kind of needs to be like the first response to getting help for sexual trauma?
The first point would be to believe what the person is saying. So you've got to trust what they've said, because then you may be the first person that they have shared that with. And if they feel that they're not being believed, then whatever that they have experienced then feels minimized, and they feel that, no one is going to believe me, and they start doubting themselves. So if somebody has trusted you with that information, hold that information and be able to let them know that you have heard them. You may not have the answers, but how can you help them navigate what the next steps might look like for them? Yeah.
When someone has told you this information and they themselves are kind of struggling to get help or not ready for that stage, is it okay to push them towards getting help? How much can you push?
No, you can't really push somebody. You can just let them know that there's help. These are the places which may be useful for providing help when you are ready.
Okay.
Some people are never ready.
Right.
And then as the person who has heard the information, you then have to live with the frustration of knowing that they've made the decision to not take it further or not do anything about the trauma that they've experienced. But for them, if that's where they are at and that's as far as they can go with dealing with it, it's okay. You're there to support, give them the information, but not push them. Because then you're maybe re-traumatizing them when they're not ready.
Okay.
You're taking them to a place where they're not ready to deal with what's going to happen next, the aftermath of it.
At what point do you need to involve somebody else if they start to exhibit signs of other behaviors that you think may be linked to that trauma? At some point, what's starts to be red flags that they need some additional support, or you need support to support them?
If they're self-neglecting, if they're harming themselves, if their mental health is really deteriorating, really emotional, being able to say, actually, this is beyond my capacity to cope and help and manage them in any way that's going to be helpful. I need to do this for myself as well as for them. So you're looking at the duty of care to them and to yourself at that point.
If you're a parent and this is your child, I assume maybe the first place may also be your family doctor, your pediatrician, something like that, to start there. We will link in the show notes some hotlines, because I know there are some available in Kenya that have been growing in terms of services to people who have experienced sexual trauma. In terms of just next steps for them in terms of healing, are there things that a friend can do other than listening? I mean, you're saying you can't really push them to get help, but are there some things? Should you be pushing them to get outside for a walk? Should you be pushing them to go see a movie? I don't know.
It takes us back to connection, because if somebody has been violated sexually and they're feeling traumatized from experience, they're going to want to isolate. They're going to isolate and neglect and maybe get into a pattern of self-destruction. So what you're trying to do is break that. You're trying to give them another reason to have activity, taking them out, as you said, exercise, out in the sun, outside in the environment, even if it's just for a walk and you're not talking, listening to music, watching a movie, having some nice food. So you're able to sort of counteract the negative impacts rather on dopamine and serotonin.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're giving them something that makes the day a bit brighter. But equally, their day may be really gloomy and you'll be there just sort of sat next to them whilst they're crying.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful, because even if they're not ready to get help, there are some things within our power that we can do.
We can do small things.
Small things. Yeah.
And encourage them to journal. because they may reread that and think, actually, now I am ready. Look where I was and look where I am now. I'm ready to take steps further to work through this trauma.
Thank you for that. I think there's unfortunately too much of this in those communities that we live in, but I think it's empowering to feel that we can do something small, that listening, being there for friends, encourage them to eat and take a walk, and little things like that can actually be steps towards
baby
healing.
Steps.
Yeah, baby steps.
Baby steps towards healing, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, this conversation is certainly one of those that I think, could have gone for hours and hours, but I won't keep you all afternoon. I know you hopefully have some Valentine's Day plans of yourself.
I don't celebrate Valentine's.
Yeah, me either.
No, it's just another. It's another day. It's just another day. Plus, my wedding anniversary is the following week, so that's what we celebrate that.
So do you have any plans for your anniversary?
I'll be at the coast.
With your husband?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know. You didn't click clear. I thought maybe you'd go by yourself.
That's a given.
That's nice.
So we'll be at the coast.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
How many years is this for you?
We'll be married 25.
Wow.
Yeah.
The silver.
Yeah.
Julie, that's a big one. Congratulations.
Yeah. If I got it wrong.
That's we won't tell. Congratulations. That's beautiful. Congratulations. Happy anniversary. Well, we like to end our show with a couple of questions we ask all of our guests. So I didn't give you these in advance. We'll see how well I know you, because I think I know the answer to your first one.
Okay.
The first question is, what is your favorite drink? What are you drinking these days?
Well, in this gorgeous sunshine, I'm drinking sparkling rosé.
Oh, I was wrong. I was going to say bubbles though, but I didn't put the rosé on it. But we did have that yummy rosé recently together. I should have gotten that right.
Yeah.
Okay. And of course, it's always, we want to know, what is bringing you joy?
Gosh, currently, my children, because they're all at sort of a stage where they're grown enough to make decisions, and just sort of seeing them how they navigate life brings me great joy, because then you think, gosh, this is a product of our parenting. So that's bringing me a lot of joy.
And also, like you said, product of how we all got here in the first place. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Shout out to the 3 babies out there doing their thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you for being on Selam Hello, Julie. I value and appreciate you as a friend, as the wisdom that you offer to the world and to our listeners, but to me also every day.
Thank you, Lily.
Love you and appreciate you.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you for being here. So listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you heard something today that helps you feel connected, empowered, maybe just learn something new that you can apply in your Valentine's Day plans or just your daily life. And if so, we'd love to hear from you. So send us a message on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Selam Hello. And that's Salam with an E. I know everywhere else in the world you spell salam, S-A-L-A-M, but in Ethiopia we spell it with an E, so it's salam and hello. And you can always email me, lily@salamandhello.com. And until we meet again, take it easy. See you next week.